Hi everybody, my name is Allison and I am the founder and owner of Pseudo Studio, which is a design studio meant to help you design realities, which could be your life, your identity, your business, your home, whatever it is, I'm here for it and would love to help you through that process. And today I really had it on my heart to talk about something that I'm very passionate about and I don't think we should gatekeep anymore, which is why do I think architectural skills and thinking, specifically being able to design at multiple scales as well as systematic thinking, deserve a seat at the table when discussing spirituality. Also, why do I think reality building is important to begin with, for everything too, not just our own lives, but our businesses, our organizations, our relationships, our programs, our everything. It is already completely intertwined with our life design, but working with it consciously can bring about powerful transformation. We all are creators. We're all creative. We all have capacity for creative energy. It's just learning the skills that you need to work consciously and be creative and apply this to the different areas of your life. So I'm not just talking about being able to draw well or whatever. You are creative, I can assure you. There are three main entry points today that I'd like to get into. So let's dive into this. The first is navigating scales. Oop, sorry if you hear grunting. My Labrador Retriever, her name's Button, is supervising the activities today. As per usual, she is the boss lady. Okay, so navigating scales. The design of the built environment, that is a very jargony word, so let me break it down for you. It just means essentially anything designed. So this interior space could be considered built environment. The building itself can be considered built environment, but also thinking of urban design, so the space between buildings and how they relate, as well as things like landscape architecture, anything that is designed and constructed and makes up your environment is the built environment. All of these things require careful consideration at all scales, from macro to micro. This means that everything from the user experience to the structural component to even silly, really small details, talk about micro, like how the wall meets the floor, are all carefully considered as a part of creating this reality. In good design, each one of these choices is latent with meaning to the designer that often hunts back to whatever their overarching central concept is, which is indicative of a certain set of values, personal values that the designer holds. Usually their personal values, whether conscious to them or not, become inherent in the design or the end result of whatever their project is. This hunts back to a book I'm currently reading that has already had a really profound impact on my life. I actually have it right here with me. It is Emergent Strategy, by Adrienne Maree Brown. I would 1000% recommend this if it at all piques your interest. I know that I won't do justice in describing it because it is so profound and all-encompassing, but if you're curious, I would definitely recommend at least taking a peek at it. So within the first couple chapters, actually, she talks about how in nature, but really in everything, what is true at one scale, so at the scale that you made a choice, whatever the intention was, at the micro scale, is true at the macro scale as well. And it is this foundational concept that becomes our compass, that allows us to navigate what can be a very overwhelming world of holding all these scales simultaneously. Which brings me into point number 2. Architecture is a series of relationships. I haven't actually heard anybody in my education or in the field talking about this, so take this with a grain of salt. This might just be me being very romantic and sentimental, and that's okay. If it resonates, it resonates. If it doesn't, chuck it. I am admittedly a very relationally driven person. It is my relationships that make life worth living, without a doubt. They are the most spiritual thing in my life. However, you should know, I define relationships differently than perhaps most. I consider myself to be in relationship with all of everything. So yes, of course, I greatly value my relationships with humans and, like my relationships with friends, family, colleagues, my dog, beautiful Button. They enrich my life and provide me with so much nourishment that I need. And they are what I consider to be sacred vessels for my own personal growth. I know for myself personally, I learn best in relationship with others. It is at that tension point of meeting up against something unfamiliar, because of course we're all sovereign beings, that I learn the most. And that is something that I'm incredibly grateful for and consider to be sacred. Now, I tend to expand past that though. So what does it mean to be in the relationship with the all of everything? I consider myself to be at the micro scale, we'll talk about scales again, at the micro scale, in relationship with myself and all the different parts of myself. So I'm in relationship with my physical body, my emotional body, my mental body, my spiritual body, and then my social body. There's a lot going on. There's a lot going on there. But I also consider myself to be in relationship with not human things. So we have every institution I've ever attended, I consider myself to have been in relationship with it. And I have tried to approach it that way. So I evaluate whether there's an alignment of values, because values are incredibly important to me. I'm in relationship with my apartment. It is a symbiotic relationship. Of course, all relationships are transactional. Both parties are getting something. There's an energetic exchange, perhaps even more of an exchange than just that. Could also be material, but all of them are transactional, and making sure to think about what is being exchanged is also important. So of course, I try to think about, with my apartment, how am I taking care of it and how is it taking care of me? Are we good stewards of one another? Is this a match? I also consider myself to be in relationship with my possessions. Am I taking care of them? How are they coming into my life? And things with overconsumption and materialism, what's going on there? And then of course, I'm in relationship with Mother Earth. What's the exchange there? And then of course, I'm in relationship with what I consider to be higher power. And whatever that is for you, you are also in relationship with it all the time. So thinking of that. Now, of course, sorry, just flipping over my notes. All the principles of a healthy relationship. Let's say if you take a romantic partner or a friendship, what are the healthy principles of relationship there? Spoiler alert, I consider them to be the same. Of course, context matters, but the general workings are the same. So think about rupture, repair, sovereignty, creating a stable, healthy foundation, intimacy, vulnerability, attunement, trust, accountability, authenticity, honesty, respect, etc. All that applies to all of these things. Because of course, what is true at one scale is true at all scales. And when you work with this, it can make for very successful, healthy relational containers in all these ways. Of course, this is very overwhelming when you think about the just absolute sheer magnitude of all of this. How can you hold being in a relationship with all of these things at all these different scales all at once? Returning to the bit from Emergent Strategy that I just also mentioned, what is true at one scale is true at all scales. That is my guiding light, and it is how I stave off some of the anxiety and overwhelm. Because I really do care about being in good relationship with everything. I want to be a good steward of those, everything that I've been given. But navigating that can be scary. So at least if I can work at one scale and get that figured out, then it will just flow from there to everything else. So finding your core set of values, and I've done this as well, and actually it's a continual process. It is likely that your values will change over time, but finding your core set of values in the present moment, what really matters to you and your concept of yourself. How do you want to be in a relationship? Makes it easy to show up in that way in all ways, so consistently. And my apologies if you hear what sounds like a fight. My dog has a problem sharing the spotlight, which I totally get. She is a beautiful being and has an immense amount of star power, and also has like a little bit of FOMO. So we're just gonna power through this. She can 100% share this. So yeah, finding that core set of values and starting with yourself. This isn't about the external. Really, everything that happens external to you flows from figuring out the internal. Once you do this work, you actually don't have to do much. There's not much efforting that happens outside of yourself. Really, it all just kind of flows, but it's making these choices inside of yourself where it all begins. In fact, I'm just feeling called to say this. Reagan Hillier, I've followed her for a little bit, and she talks about really in life, your work, 80% of it is going to be doing the internal work. And that 20% is taking aligned, intentional action and decision and choices outside of yourself. So once again, getting clear on your core set of values really has a way of shaping your reality without you having to do very much work outside of yourself. It seems, I'm gonna swear, back-ass words, and it kind of is, especially with the way that society is currently designed. But just try it out and experiment and let go of these commonly held beliefs and start playing with them. Like, what if you do believe that life can be easy if you just, like, the work is devoted to yourself rather than outside of yourself? So just to, that was a little bit of a digression. It is through my training as a designer that I learned all of this. Your concept is everything, whether it's for a project. I've done it many times. I literally have some of my models behind me. Each one of these had a concept that led the charge. And from holding that concept, every decision that then got made related back to that concept. There was an alignment between concept, values, and execution, aligned action. And in this ideal world where you do make all your decisions and choices from this internal compass of your values and your concept for your life or whatever it is, you're making a life built on integrity, and that's beautiful. So finally, we've made it to the third point. Go us, teamwork. So point 3 is we literally design realities. So architects do this, interior designers do this, urban planners do this, landscape architects do this, really designers of any kind do this. And whether it's your career choice or not, you are also capable of doing this. So let's explore this a little bit together. Right now, like me, you are likely sitting in a physical reality designed and built by somebody or someone's, plural, likely someone's. As you are sitting there, your environment is affecting you just as much as you are affecting it. You are literally consuming your environment at all times. It's not really a choice, it's a passive process, but you are taking it in visually, through sounds, through touch, through hopefully not taste, hopefully you're not licking the wall, but you do you. through smell. So it's in you just as much as you are in it. So what is less talked about, though, is that you are also consuming the values of whoever designed it. Because of course, their values, as we've been discussing this whole time, are inherent in each thing that they create. So back to what I said earlier, the values of every designer are inherent in their work, just like I just said, regardless of whether they try to make it happen or not. It's a part of them. It's a part of you. So a little experiment that you can do to like explore this, because I know this is a touch esoteric, it would be to like look around you right now. Based on what you can see and experience of this designed reality you're in, what do you think the values of this space were? And I will give you some examples because I'm a dweeb and I do this all the time. I love thinking about, you know, what are people really trying to get me to do here? That's so bad, but it's fun. So I think let's just start at like macro scale together, and then I'll go to the personal scale. So macro scale, I mean, it's easier to point out the bad, but it's not all bad. There's a lot of wonderful, great designers out there who are making a positive impact. But just to like really get you in the game of how the reality around you can be designed, think about segregation. Those were choices made by designers to affect the built environment. And that's a little bit more explicitly stated, their choices, values, concept in the end result. And nowadays, those kind of things are more blurred, more veiled. So more and more people are finding out about hostile architecture. And for those of you who aren't familiar with that concept, one of the greatest examples is people designing the built environment to discourage homeless people from congregating, sleeping, finding shelter in certain parts of like the exterior environment of a building. So, you know, sometimes they are very explicit, so obvious. I mean, think of like, especially in a downtown environment, some buildings will have like actual spikes around alcoves along the perimeter, but some people make it more aesthetically pleasing and less obvious, and that all hunts back to values, right? All of these choices hunt back to values. So, you know, they'll design benches that are benches, but they have armrests at specific widths apart that prevent homeless people or whoever need a place to sleep and rest, like anybody. So it prevents them from sleeping there or just laying down and being a human. So these choices and values that then translate into these tangible experiences, physical objects, buildings, they have a real impact on the humans that are experiencing them. A person who's experiencing homelessness might, you know, what does that tell them about their value in the community and their place in the world? It says you're not welcome here. That actually makes me emotional. So these choices seem, these choices when you're a designer seem inconsequential, or they can. And it's because you're so far removed from the end result. But at the end of the day, we're all so interconnected. And being aware of your design process and the choices you make and how everything that is happening in here has a massive impact on the world around you. Nothing exists in a vacuum. It's so important to realize this. So those are some probably examples that you've seen or maybe have experienced. So that's one way to think about it. and at the personal level, how I've personally experienced this, because you can use it as a way to design your life too. So I obviously have been pursuing my Master of Architecture, and I started at one particular university. And at this university, I was a part of a roundtable discussion as a presenter with some other really wonderful, beautiful women who I have a profound amount of respect and reverence for. We were all discussing equity in the built environment and what would that look like. And as we were discussing this with the students that were present, the topic of values came up. I feel like that always happens when I'm around. I'm a little bit of a geek for that. So I don't remember exactly how it came up, but the student and I were discussing how can you like tell the values of a designer based on what they've created. And I gave the example of the very simple reality of the chairs that had been selected for our studio environment. So these stools are metal and backless and not remotely comfortable, to be totally upfront. And you likely have not been in an architecture studio setting, so we spend a lot of time there. The classes themselves usually are about 4.5 hours, I think. About that, 4 hours. So you're sitting there for quite a lengthy period of time working on your computer, hunched over. It's not quite ergonomic, especially with the addition of a metal stool to sit on. So that's a particular set of values that went into specifying it. And it's not necessarily like malicious. It's just like, do you value aesthetics? Do you value meeting the budget and this is what worked for that? Or do you value students and their well-being? Or, I mean, there's probably a multitude of other sets of values in there too, but it's finding the alignment with your own. So we were discussing that and just kind of playing with what are the values inherent in these decisions. And I had a full circle moment. I had to make good on, I had to practice what I preach. Not just talk the talk, but walk the walk. Always fun living in integrity, but that's what integrity is, right? It's not choosing what's fun or easy, as Brene Brown would say. It's like actually living in accordance with your values. So I transferred because there was just a pretty overwhelming misalignment in values between me and my previous institution. So like any relationship, you know, sometimes you have to cut ties, and that's heartbreaking and hard, but ultimately self-love will see you through. So when I was evaluating this new school, I remember approaching the school visit much differently than most. I could hear all the other prospective students saying, oh, I don't like the ceiling, like the ceiling height or how it's decorated in here. But when I entered the studio spaces, I was like, oh my God, they have like actual office chairs with backs that are comfortable for the students. And from that perspective, I was like, they value their students and their students' well-being. And because that was in alignment with my own values, that was a massive green flag for me. Now, of course, like a lot more went into the decision than that. I didn't just say chairs. That's the bar. But that's like a way to think through this. There's choices that really, like, even anybody, like if you look at a person's life, what choices they're making, how they're choosing to design their life. So what they wear, how do they spend their time? How do they spend their money? What career are they in? Do they like it? All these can be indicative of their values, and it's just good to keep an eye on that and use your discernment. I mean, don't go like crazy. We're all human. But I do think that that can be an entry point into designing your life or whatever. Values. Values are my thing. I can't stress them enough. So as I mentioned before, values are not good, bad, right, or wrong. There is simply alignment and misalignment with, your own. It all depends on your personal makeup. So there's a lot of power clearly in the design process, as we've been discussing, and it all stems from our central concept to create realities that people are constantly occupying and consuming to either their benefit or their detriment. Just like junk food, there is junk architecture and junk values. It just depends on your personal constitution that determines what those things are for you, and whether or not you want to choose to be in communion with them, whether you want to consume them or not. So this process, though, can also be harnessed for good, obviously, and many people are doing it. And I hope that these discussions help even more people do it. So when it is worked with consciously, this can happen. And it all starts at the personal level for everyone, including designers. Who are you? What are your values? And what is your concept? So yeah, I'd love to hear in the comments anything you want to discuss about this. I mean, clearly this is my passion in life. I was the person who took theory classes and everything maybe a little too seriously, but hey, let's make it benefit all of us. So yeah, I look forward to hearing from you and seeing you in the next video. Bye-bye.